All right, welcome everybody to last session of what's been a very busy day. So thank you for joining us and bringing your enthusiasm to this session. I am Dan Lear from OBIS, where I'm co-chair of the OBIS steering group, but I also am head of data at the Marine Biological Association in the UK. This session's also co-delivered by Ellie Wallace from the Atlas of Living Australia team, but she unfortunately isn't able to join us here in Bogota, and Ruben Perez at the back there from GBIF Spain. And so between us, we will be co-running this session on the power and pitfalls of civic science. We're going to look at how sort of volunteers and communities in biodiversity research can enrich and challenge the ways that we do science. Citizen and participatory science can expand our coverage, filling those gaps that we've heard about over the last few days. It connects people with nature, which is vital at the moment, you know, that health you get from being in green and blue spaces, and makes science more inclusive generally. But then, on the other hand, it raises questions about quality, consistency, the needs for training, and the sustainability of citizen science programs. So in this session, we've got some really interesting talks about innovative approaches, partnerships and case studies that tackle some of these issues, showing how civic science can meaningfully inform research, policy, and add to actionable and usable data. So we've got the world's smallest microphone here for the online participants and the simultaneous translation. So I'll be running around handing this to people as and when we have questions, and to the speakers that we have. We will be taking a couple of questions, both in the room and online, at the end of every presentation. But then we have got time at the end of the session where we'll open the floor up. So if you don't get a chance to ask your question, then there will be opportunity in the last sort of 15 minutes of this session as well. We're low tech here. We only have the one screen. There's no presenter screen, and there's no timer other than Ruben holding up his fingers in a non-confrontational manner. We also don't have a clicker to advance the slide, but in that great spirit of civic science, we're going to make do and make the best of the situation. So if the speakers can just say next slide, we've got the AV technical team at the back who are going to be supporting us. So we'll have questions coming in online from Zoom participants as well, so we want to make sure that they feel included as part of it as well. So after all that, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Matt Streamus-Mackey from the Cornell Lab for Ornithology. He's going to be talking to us about the power of validated participatory science data with an eBird case study. Over to you, Matt. I'll hand on the microphone.
Hold it here.
You can hold it, you can flip it, whatever works for you.
Okay, I guess I'll just hold it. Okay, so I'm Matt Streamus. I'm a data scientist at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, and I want to talk about a pathway for using participatory science data to inform wildlife policy and management. I'm going to talk about two case studies from the United States, one focusing on waterfowl, the other focusing on eagles, that both highlight the importance of a collaborative process of validation to build trust in the recommendations that are coming out of participatory science data sets. Next slide. So in the US, decision-making for migratory birds is typically based on traditional structured surveys by wildlife professionals. For example, up here on the top left, this is like an aerial survey for waterfowl that the US Fish and Wildlife Service conducts for various species around the US. Then these surveys are great. They produce good quality data for the species, regions, and times of year that they're designed, but they're also super expensive. They're pretty logistically challenging to implement, and as a result, there's generally fairly limited spatial, temporal, and taxonomic coverage for these kind of professional surveys. In contrast, I'm going to be talking about eBird, which is a global participatory science bird monitoring project that has like over 2 billion bird observations collected by over 1 million volunteer birders. And this map on the top right shows the broad distribution of those observations globally. So this data set has this amazing broad spatial, temporal, and taxonomic coverage that makes it really powerful for supplementing data from structured surveys. But there are some issues with eBird, just as there are with a lot of participatory science data sets. In particular, they can be prone to bias because of the flexible protocols involved. Next slide. So with that in mind, we take the raw eBird data and combine them with a suite of remotely sensed environmental variables in a machine learning framework, and then we model the distribution and abundance of about 3,000 species globally. And this is one example of the types of results that we produce. This is for blue-winged teal, and it's showing throughout the year at 3 kilometer spatial resolution the relative abundance of this species week by week as it migrates from the southern portion of its range to the northern portion of its range. And without getting into too much of the technical detail, the modeling methodology we use is specifically designed to handle the sorts of challenges that you encounter with participatory science data. So these maps and the data behind them are really valuable tool for for making decisions about wildlife and informing policy. Next slide. But understandably, there's still some skepticism that these modeled eBird results are robust enough for this sort of decision-making context. Next. So with that in mind, we found a lot of success with this collaborative pathway to bring these participatory science data sets into the decision-making process. And it starts by partnering directly with decision makers. And then together we identify information needs that the eBird status and trends data set could fill. And then we validate the status and trends estimates using typically structured professional survey data. And that helps to build the trust that's necessary to use the recommendations from the status and trends data products. Next. So as I said, I'm going to present 2 case studies. The first case study relates to, it's a collaboration between some of my colleagues at Cornell and a group of state, federal, and non-governmental agencies that are focused on habitat management for waterfowl in the Great Lakes region of the US. And the specific information need is for migration chronologies, which just sort of show the change in abundance of these waterfowl species throughout the year within the study region. And historically, these agencies have filled that information need through aerial surveys and some ground surveys. But because of some of the challenges I already mentioned, there's an interest in supplementing and those aerial surveys with eBird status and trends data products, because eBird status and trends provides exactly this sort of like high resolution distribution information that is well suited to this application. So we took some of those aerial survey data from 7 states for 16 waterfowl species, and we used them to validate the eBird status and trends migration chronologies. Next slide. So here are some of the results for 3 waterfowl species: mallard, green-winged teal, and American widgeon, comparing the eBird results and the structured survey results. So these are the migration chronologies I was talking about. On the y-axis is an index of relative abundance scaled so that the 2 data sets are kind of on the same scale. On the x-axis is the weeks of the year. The middle of the x-axis is sort of November, December, like the North American winter. The solid line is the migration chronology from eBird, and the dashed line is the migration chronology from the structured surveys. So they're basically just showing within this study region within the US, how does the population change throughout the year as these species are migrating in and out of the study region. And you can see just visually that there's pretty high degree of agreement between the two curves. And of course, the authors of the study went further to do a proper statistical analysis to confirm that across the full set of species, there's quite high correlation between the two data sets. And this gave this group of habitat management agencies the confidence in the results to use them for making their management decisions. Next slide. In this next example, a group of colleagues from Cornell partnered again with the US Fish and Wildlife Service, this time with the National Raptor Program, to produce fine-scale population density estimates for golden eagles in the western United States. The US Fish and Wildlife Service has been running aerial surveys for these species for golden eagles for a number of years. And these aerial surveys allow them to get population estimates at these broad management units that are shown outlined in black in that map. These are large areas, larger than the size of a US state. And the hope was to use the status and trends data to fill gaps and also increase the spatial resolution of these estimates. So we used 10 years of this aerial transect survey data to validate the eBird estimates. Next slide. The one catch here is that status and trends estimates are relative abundance. They're not measures of absolute abundance. So the first step was to build a statistical model to scale the eBird results to be up to sort of absolute abundance using the structured surveys. And then the second step was to then validate those now absolute abundance estimates coming from eBird. And this chart on the right shows that validation process for one of the management regions shown here with the orange arrow. So you can see on the y-axis is the population size estimate within that management unit. On the x-axis is the 10 years that we have the survey data for. And the green line is the eBird data. The black dots are the structured survey data, the estimates of the population size throughout this time period. And you can see there's almost sort of, in this management unit, almost perfect alignment between the two data sets. So having these scaling relationships and knowing that the data were validated allowed the Fish and Wildlife Service to then take full advantage of the high resolution of this data set, of the eBird status and trends data set. Next slide. So recall that the Fish and Wildlife Service has these aerial surveys which are shown in the red dots in this map here. These are quite coarse spatially, so all they're able to do is get estimates at the level of the broad habitat management units of population size. Next slide. So they get these, for each of these management units, they get estimates. But this assumes constant population density across the management unit, which is clearly incorrect. There's a lot of heterogeneity in the habitat and then associated population size. But now that we have these status and trends estimates that have been scaled and validated, we can, next slide, we can take full advantage of the high resolution of those estimates to produce much more fine-scaled maps and in turn make much more fine-scaled decisions. Next slide. So just as I close, to kind of reiterate, I'm highlighting this collaborative process of validation. And for eBird, it starts with modeling, producing a model data product that deals with a lot of the issues associated with citizen science data. Next, partnering with the policymakers and decision makers to identify information needs, and then finally validating the eBird-derived estimates using structured survey data. Next. And if you're interested in learning more about the status and trends results, you can visit science.ebird.org. And if you want to learn more about the specific case studies, I would encourage you to look at these two papers. Thanks.
So yeah, if there's any questions for Matt in the room or anything online. Question at the back, hang on, I will deliver the small microphone.
Yeah, you showed there how you were using the structured data to validate the eBird data. I wondered if you'd attempted to build a sort of integrated model that would combine both sort of data streams at the same time.
Hang on, sorry. It's the only way I get the steps in.
I mean, I suppose with the Eagle example, it was somewhat integrated because we had to use both data sets. You have to use the structured data to scale the eBird results. But there are other examples of where we have done integrated models. Courtney, does anything come to mind to one of you guys? I'm turning to my colleagues here.
There are a couple of examples. Most of them are more region specific. So oftentimes we don't have the structured data across the same extents that we do eBird data. And so a lot of the times the validation is happening in much more smaller scales. But there are a couple of instances of that happening.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, great. If not, I'll introduce our next speaker. We're moving from birds in the sky to the shore with Chloe Figueroa-Ashforth from the Marine Biological Association and OBIS UK. She's going to be talking about connecting marine civic science to global biodiversity data.
Thank you. So hi everyone, buenas tardes. I'm Chloe and I'll be talking about how Dash and OBIS UK are connecting civic science to global biodiversity data. Next slide please. So Dash is the UK Archive for Marine Species and Habitats data, and we're also the UK node of OBIS. We're a Quartra Seal accredited data archive centre. We're quite a small team and we're based down at the Marine Biological Association in Plymouth in the UK. Our work includes facilitating the sharing of data from citizen science, research and industry to national and international systems, and this can include data submitted by individuals or from whole projects. We also provide tools and services, so that includes Dash Mapper, the IPT, a metadata help desk. And we promote best practice by publishing data in standardized formats like Darwin Core, and also discovery metadata that adheres to international metadata standards. Next slide, please. So the data we publish are shared to national and global systems. At the national level, Dash shares the data with the NBN Atlas, so the National Biodiversity Network, and the metadata records get shared to the MEDIN portal. So MEDIN is the UK's Marine Environmental Data and Information Network. Globally, they're shared then to GBIF, Eurobis, EMODNet and OBIS, and that supports the principle of publish once, harvest many times. Next, please. Yeah. So at the UK level, NBN Atlas is the UK's GBIF node, and with Dash being the UK's OBIS node, we've got that collaboration between us. Next, please. So how do we support civic science? Next. So at the individual level, we provide support in a few different ways. So we have iRecord. Next. That is a UK platform that was launched in 2012. Individuals can submit sightings via a web form. It has a minimum set of metadata records in order to submit the sighting. It has a level of expert verification before being shared onwards, and Dash has a role with that expert verification, so we verify some of the records ourselves, and we also contact experts to get those verified and flowing through. Next. We also have iNaturalist. So the MBA is a founding partner of iNaturalist UK, and we lead on the marine component of that. So as you're probably all already aware, it's a platform where you can submit sightings via an app or website. There is that community verification step to reach research grade and then be able to share the records onwards. That community verification is great, but it also means that there can be some identification bias issues with that. Next. Individuals can also submit sightings directly to DASH, so if they have individual records or a full data set, they can submit those to us, and they will be subject to a thorough quality assurance procedure. They will get a discovery metadata record created and a DOI minted for those. The data are then published to the DASH mapper, and then they flow through to that UK marine biodiversity data flow. Next, please, which is this. So the records from iNaturalist flows through to iRecord, and then there they get held for an expert verification. It's worth noting this is just a UK marine flow, so I believe in other parts of the world they don't have that sort of iRecord step. From iRecord, then they pass through to the NBN Trust, and then they get all the marine records from NBN get sent down to DASH. DASH then puts the standardized records onto the IPT, and they get harvested by the international data aggregators. The metadata gets shared on the Medin portal, and it's not on there, but the Medin portal records then also get shared to the Ocean Info Hub. Next, please. So you can just see the seaweed record traveling all the way through the data flows. So in terms of projects, we support the Rockpool project. This is a not-for-profit citizen science initiative aiming to connect citizen scientists to nature via Rockpool challenges. Next, please. And again. So they collect the data using iNaturalist, and they have a great way of engaging participants by making a competition out of it. So at their events, they have scores for each species that they find based on the rarity, and whoever gets the most points wins the challenge. Next. And again. And they communicate the results really well with the participants, which keeps them engaged with the data as well as with nature. Next. DASH has developed an automated reporting system for non-native species, and sending those research-grade records through to the UK government agencies at an early stage. And then this can help to influence the non-native species list in the UK and to improve in species management and mitigation quickly, rather than kind of waiting for it all to flow through to the systems. We also have provided support with establishing the data flow through to Opus UK. And as you'll notice, that is, as they use iNaturalist, it's the same data flow as we saw before, flowing through to iRecord, NBN, DASH, and then onto the international data aggregators. Next. And this time it's the crab's turn to go through. Next. So some of the strengths of citizen science are that they connect people to nature, they increase data literacy, and it creates a community of volunteers that are committed to a project. And these volunteers can then also encourage and train other people to join. They create large volumes of data, and this can span very wide geographic areas. And they can also complement professionally collected data for the use in scientific research, monitoring, and policy. Some limitations, there can be some data validation limitations. There might be a wide range of techniques being used, even within just one data type. Limited data literacy and knowing where to share data or where to find the data from the project that you've been involved in. Potentially, some of the data might not be shared under open licenses as well, or they might be difficult to connect to global systems. Next. So to tackle some of these issues, the Citizen Science Best Practice Guide was created. This is a dynamic tool for creators and users of UK marine citizen science data. It was created by DASH in partnership with Natural England and funded by DEFRA through the Natural Capital Ecosystem Assessment Programme. Next. So it reviewed existing best practice recommendations from over 60 literature sources and compiled these into an interactive web resource. So it's structured around the data lifecycle, so plan, collect, process, preserve, sharing, and reusing. And each of these stages then has a list of activities that a user should consider if they're at that stage in their project. So yeah, a user can kind of drop into whichever section they need without having to read the whole thing. Next. So this is a screenshot from the tool. You can either view it online or it can be downloaded as a live PDF, so whenever updates are made, that will be reflected in the PDF that is downloaded from here. Next. So if a user wants to find out where to share their data, so for example, if they're organizing a citizen science project and they want to find out where they will need to send their data to, they can go to Plan and then to Data Archive Centers. Next. And that will give them a page with information about what data archive centers are, which ones exist, which ones would be relevant for their data. And then there's a section with recommendations at the bottom, so a checklist of what they should keep in mind. And then where relevant, there are also case studies that helps to illustrate how other projects have applied this information. Next. And as we're all aware, the data world is full of acronyms, so we've got a glossary to help users understand what all of them mean. So if any of them are in the text, and if the user clicks on them, then it will give them a definition and a link to further information. Next. So the guide is intended to be a dynamic tool for the citizen science community, which will remain up to date with current best practices. So some of our future plans include the addition of a self-assessment tool, so users can identify what stage they're at and what they need to do next. There is an annual review and update that takes place, and we address the ongoing feedback that we receive as well and incorporate that into the guide. The tool's been well received in the UK, so we're also interested in collaboration to see how this can be incorporated into other similar guides and tools beyond the UK as well. Next. That's the end. Muchas gracias.
Okay. Thank you, Chloe. Any questions for Chloe, either in the room or online? Yep.
Hi, Chloe. Thanks so much. I have a question about the step from when the data go from iNaturalist to iRecord. If there are changes made to those data during that verification, do those changes get made in iNaturalist also? Does someone go back? Or like, because iNaturalist and research grade data are shared with GBIF and also iRecord, so what happens if there are two data points?
So you mean if a change is made at the iRecord stage? Yeah, so if an expert, yeah, so that record would be the same record that then gets passed through to NBN. So when it reaches NBN, it's just one record. It's not sort of one for iNaturalist and one for iRecord. So it's just the one that goes through, if that makes sense.
Yes, it makes sense. That makes complete sense, but iNaturalist also sends data to GBIF on their own. So what happens if there's a change made and that point is one point with two different names, for example?
Yeah, so in the UK, the data goes from iRecord rather, so there isn't a iNaturalist directly to GBIF flow. So it kind of has a slightly different flow than it would in other countries. So that's why the the confusion.
Ruben?
Thank you. It's about the notification system for the invasive species. Do you have, like, how do these automated invasive species alert avoid false positives while still enabling early detection? How do you deal with the false positive if it's like an automated system of?
So the notification system gets passed through from, or only the research grade observations that get passed through then through an email to the UK government agencies. In terms of false positives, I'm not actually 100% sure how they're dealt with. So do you have any ideas on that? Sorry, I'm just
So yeah, I'm part of the project as well, which is why I'm jumping in, so apologies, Chloe. Yeah, so the records that are flagged as being identified are all verified within the Rockpool project by expert marine biologists on the ground. So part of that Rockpool project program is it pairs citizen scientists with trained experts, and then that feeds through. Again, that's given to the statutory agencies as a early warning, and it's better to have early sight than no sight, is the thinking. Thanks, Chloe. We're back up into the air again now for a talk from Jeremy Cohen of Yale, looking at the geographic distributions. I was saying redistributions insufficient to mitigate exposure to climate change. I'm sure you'll say it much more clearly than I will. Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you for that, and thank you all for being here today. I do have some regrets about the title, actually. It makes it seem like this is really an empirical talk, but it's going to be equal parts empirical and methodological. So stay tuned if you're really interested in trend estimation using GVIF data. Next slide, please. So I live in the Northeast US, and if I sit outside my house for about 5 minutes, I'm pretty much guaranteed to see all of these species of birds. They're all extremely common in the region, but this wasn't always the case. If I sat in that same yard 50, 60, 70 years ago, it would be much less likely that I'd see some of these and pretty much impossible to find some of these other ones. And so what's happening here is that these species are on the move over the past couple of decades. They've been moving further poleward, a lot of species have been moving to higher elevations, and that's all part of a broader plan where species are trying to avoid the consequences of heat and take advantage of cooler areas. Next slide, please. And this isn't exactly news. This is something that's been tracked pretty consistently by scientists over the past 20 or 30 years with a variety of different publications, whether it's birds or other species. Next slide, please. And this is also a topic that's fascinated the public as well. So we've seen all these infographics in different media outlets where you have tracking, just visualizing species moving from point A to point B. You also have cartoons like this one where you have something like a ptarmigan that's saying, hey, what are you guys doing up here? And then this thing that's supposed to be a wren is saying, what do you want? It's climate change. Next slide, please. So we know that birds are moving in response to climate change, but there's kind of an obvious follow-up question that hasn't been asked super often, and that question is, what are the consequences of that movement? And so we had kind of a couple of follow-up questions to that that really necessitated answering this question across lots of species, across broad spatial extents, and through multiple times of year. So we wanted to ask, have species that have been moving the furthest been best at avoiding exposure to climate change? Are birds avoiding exposure differently across seasons? So you might think that species might be avoiding heat a little bit more carefully in the summer when they're up against their upper thermal limits, their physiological limitations, versus in the winter. And then number 3 is the ability to mitigate exposure dependent on life history or functional traits. So you could imagine that species that have traits that facilitate dispersal, those species might be a little bit better at kind of moving to avoid these novel conditions. Next slide, please. So there have been a few previous more limited efforts in scope to address this question in terms of fewer species or a single geographic area or one time of the year. But we wanted to ask this, as I mentioned, across large regions, seasons, and many species over decades, and which necessitates large ecological data sets, large high-resolution environmental data sets. If you're at this conference, you know that we're in the era of big data and ecology, so we have this data available and the computational power to kind of put it all together. But I bolded this last point because it's kind of the critical one here. It can be really tough to estimate trends with messy observational, often citizen science data. So next slide, please. The reason why this is because you introduce even more biases than you already have working with citizen science data. So we often think about data collected often at populated areas or during specific times of year so that we have these spatial and temporal biases associated with the data. But we can also have biases that are related to temporal trends. So if you imagine that human population growth, for example, is higher in one part of the map and maybe negative in a different part of the map, that could result in an increase in citizen science contributions over time that's really uneven in space. And this might not just be population growth, it could be driven by socioeconomics or other factors that change over time that are associated with citizen science contribution. And so in that southwest part of the map in this example, you could be overestimating trends in population size, range expansion, biodiversity change, and underestimating trends in other parts of the map. Next slide. So you could think about this in environmental space as well. If human population growth is really high in really hot and wet areas, you could introduce those same biases in environmental space. And then you could overestimate trends in things like climate change exposure or niche loss in those parts of the map as well. Next slide, please. So we introduced this framework to unbiased trend estimation using citizen science data. And so we estimate trends not only, so a trend in this example on the left panel here, in movement in space over time, so it could be latitude or elevation. So we measure this trend not only using the species observations in orange, but also what we call the observer background points in gray. And so what we do is we grab the entire pool of observations across all bird species within that region, and we look at where that kind of pool is shifting in space so that we can account for it and control for it. So in this case, it's really simple. What we do is just subtract that slope of that observer trend from the species trend, and we get this realized shift in space. But in environmental space, it gets a little bit more complicated. Next slide, please. Because not only are we measuring, this once again, the species trend in some environmental feature like temperature over time, and we're also measuring this observer trend in gray with that background set of observations. But we have to think about the fact that observer trend is actually made of two components here. Number one, it's made of the trend in that environmental feature that's due to that movement from the top row, but it's also due to climate change that was experienced in that region, right? So that observer change in some environmental feature is made of those two components. So we have to measure this third component, which is this expected climate change in the region. And this is based off of the species observations towards the beginning of the 20-year period, so that we can then remove that expected climate change trend and be left with only the trend resulting from that observer movement. And so once we remove those components, we remove that first, the climate change trend from the observer trend, and then remove that from the species trend. We're left with that realized species change in the environmental feature. And the difference between that and the climate change in the region is the mitigation. So that's how much that species mitigated the effect of climate change through movement, ideally. So next, please. So to implement all this, put this into action, we grabbed 20 years of GBIF data and annotated it with STOAT, which is a feature which is an annotation tool through Map of Life, with data from MODIS and CHELSA, temperature, productivity, and precipitation. Next slide. Next slide, please. For 406 bird species in North America for summer and winter. Next slide, please. We used nothing fancy, just generalized linear models to look at how a spatial or niche metric like latitude or elevation or temperature or precipitation is predicted by the interaction between year and the observation type. So either the actual species observations, the background observer points, or those pseudo-observations reflecting the climate change trend. And then use some estimated marginal means to pull out these different trends. Next slide, please. So I don't have a ton of time left, but I'll run through a couple examples. For blue-winged warbler, we saw this really positive movement north and a slight observer movement south. When we put that together, we get this 1.4 degree movement north. Next slide, please. A relatively shallow slope, positive slope for the species in terms of maximum temperature, but stronger slopes for the observer and for the climate change in the region. So when we put that together, we get 0.7 degrees of warming that's experienced, which is actually 1.9 less than what was expected in the region. So the species really moved north and didn't experience too much climate change. With Nashville warbler, the next one, we saw somewhat neutral or slightly negative trends in latitude, so very little shift. And then when we move over to the temperature change, not much difference between what's happening in the background with the observers or with climate change. And so we see that it experienced almost the full amount of the climate change that was expected in the region, 1.9 degrees. Next slide. So when we look across all species, what we see is really interesting. This movement north of about 0.7 degrees latitude across both seasons. But in terms of maximum temperature that was expected to be experienced, we saw actually over 2 degrees during the summer and over 4 degrees expected during the winter. This is max temperature, so it's a little bit more extreme than mean temperature. Sorry, previous slide. With that third panel, what they actually experienced was a little bit less because they moved north. So they experienced a little over 3 degrees during the winter and a little over 1.5 during the summer. And so that fourth panel is just the difference between number 2 and number 3, what they mitigated. And what you can see is that even though they were expected to experience a ton of warming during the winter, they only mitigated a tiny bit of it. That's a slight negative value. But during the summer, they negated almost half of the warming they were expected to experience. So exactly like we hypothesized. Next slide, please. This, I think, is the coolest slide in the paper. What we found is that when we put latitude on one axis, the x-axis, and the change in temperature experienced at the species level on the y-axis, this is at the species level with each point representing a species, we see this strong negative trend across both seasons, in which the further you move north, the less climate change, the less warming you experienced. But what's really striking about this is that only if you look at the trend line, it's only when you move north by 4 degrees, which is a lot, it's like 450 kilometers, where you expected to experience no warming. And if you didn't move at all, you're experiencing up to 4 or 5 degrees of warming, which is crazy. And even a lot of the species that did move 1-2 degrees experienced a lot of warming. Next slide, please. We looked across some functional traits. These are partial residual plots based on phylogenetic generalized least squares models. This was the more interesting trait that popped out. We looked at migration distance, and across both seasons using totally independent data, we found really strikingly similar trends in long-distance migrants being the species that realized the least amount of exposure to climate change, which was pretty cool. Next, I'll have to skip this one, unfortunately, productivity and precipitation. Next slide. And I'll just end on this one, which is where a reviewer ruined my life for a month by suggesting that I repeat the entire study using not just GBIF like we did originally, but eBird alone and breeding bird survey data. But it was really cool in the end because we found the same results across all of these. And I don't have the time to show you lots of different results that were replicated across these different data sources, but it was cool to see that we could do that. So next slide. I'll skip this one and just say that a lot of projections of range shifts with climate change that kind of predict SDMs into with future climate data kind of assume that species are going to perfectly track their environmental niches into new space. But what we see is even with this highly mobile taxon, birds, it's really difficult to kind of keep pace with the changes that are occurring, and most species are not able to. So next slide, please. I just thank all the people that gave valuable feedback, all the data sources and universities and funding sources. So you can read this in Nature Eco Evo. Thanks.
Thank you, Jeremy, for a real deep dive into the data. That was fantastic. We've got time for one quick question. Nope. Oh, at the back there, yeah.
Yeah, thanks, really nice talk. You focused on the sort of geographic shifts. I wonder if there's any elevational shifts that might explain some of the species that weren't geographically shifting.
Very excited to answer. So in this North American birds case study, no, we didn't really see much with elevation, even when we isolated it down to like interior west species, for example. But we are following this up with a taxonomic and geographic expansion, so like global expansion of this framework to other taxa as well. And we're seeing pretty much every other continent, elevation is important, just not in North America, which makes a lot of sense when you think about it, and especially in the tropics too. But yeah, elevation is a key factor there, so it's interesting.
We'll move on. Hopefully we'll have a bit of time at the end if people have more questions for Jeremy. So we're going to jump back across the North Atlantic to a virtual presentation from Michael Pocock from the UK Centre for Ecology and Hydrology. on adaptive citizen science. Michael is online, so we will be able to take questions at the end.
From the UK Centre for Ecology and Hydrology. I'm going to be talking to you about adaptive citizen science, so thinking about how we can use spatial targeting to improve biodiversity monitoring. Thank you to the organisers for making it possible for me. When we think about citizen science, we're all really concerned about it being fit for purpose, and we know that there are challenges with accuracy of data points, but also challenges with the uneven spatial coverage of the data. So how can we solve that? Well, we can use more structured, systematic sampling designs within our citizen science. We can use more careful analysis. Thirdly, we can change the questions, so only answering the questions which the data are suitable for us to answer. And fourthly, the one that I'm interested in speaking about today is about changing the bias. So collecting the data differently, getting the data that we really, really need. And this is, of course, important because there are so many projects of so many different types that allow people to take part when and where they choose. And so you get this spatial unevenness, whether at the country level, such as shown by this diagram here on the left, or at the river catchment level, such as the example shown on the right. So at large and small spatial scales, that's important. So we get to this point where all records are valuable. But we don't simply need more records, we need more informative records. So the big question is how do you, as a recorder who wants to make a difference, choose where to record? Or for you as a data user, how do you encourage people to go to the places where you really need those records? So I'm going to show a couple of examples. The first one is the targeting revisits maps. So in the UK, volunteer collected data is absolutely vital, and we've been able to produce occupancy trends for 9,000 species for the UK State of Nature report. But the thing about those occupancy models that we've been using is that they only use data from sites that have been recorded in 2 years. That's a choice that we've made. So what it means is that we can map those sites where we've got records, and distinguish between those where we've got records for only 1 year, those in pink, and those where we've got records in multiple years, those shown in green. What that means is that a recorder can go to the square in pink, make records, in this case of grasshoppers, and turn that pink square green. And so using this tool, which has been around for a few years now, we did some evaluation to ask people what they thought of it and how it impacted their recording. And people said that yes, tools like this are really influential. It's very likely to influence their recording. How much? Well, some of the time, not all of the time, but some of the time they can be influenced by this sort of thing. So being able to see how impactful my recording can be, said one of the respondents, and directing me to where recording can have the greatest impact is immensely powerful and motivating. So that's exactly the sort of thing that we want to do within our citizen science. So secondly, I'll talk about the DECIDE project. This was a project which was set up as a research project to explore some of these questions about recording nature where it matters, supported by the NERC in the UK. So we've got this premise that observers go out, and many observers go out and collect data, and they submit that data and it goes into digital databases, and we can use the data from those databases to run models. In our case, we were looking at fine scale and spatially comprehensive distribution models. That was the thing that our stakeholders said that they really needed. But the thing is that if you define a target that you'd like to maximize or to optimize, then you can actually feed that information back to the recorders and so spatially target the new recording effort. It creates this sort of idea of a digital twin, this idea of spatial, of citizen science adaptive sampling. And it's really important in this context to be thinking about the people involved. And so we've been trying to think in terms of not simply designing and forcing people to do stuff, but to create these behavioural nudges to enhance motivation. So drawing on some of the models and the theories from psychology in order to have this benefit where the motivations lead to behavior and behavior change, and where that behavior change goes back and influences motivations. Motivations will be many. There are so many reasons why people get involved in this sort of recording. Ideas around nature connectedness and well-being, such as that in the paper indicated here, is just one of the examples. And so from this project we developed this tool, the Decide tool. And so we asked people, do you want to discover new places to record wildlife? So this was the pitch. If you do, then you can explore the Decide tool. It shows you those places with high priority for recording, and then you can go to those locations, make records using the tools that you choose. So people can go on the map and they can click, they can get 5 kilometre radius circle, and within that the colours show the relative recording priorities. So we identified recording priorities as those places where the existing spatial distribution models are most uncertain. So yellow indicates high uncertainty from those models. We also provided the option for pins, so those pins give suggestions of the sorts of places where it would be really great for people to go, and that's based on not just the priority but also the accessibility based on other layers within the model, within the tool. And this was updated in real time from iRecord. Now people can select to click on any one of these points within the map, and they will also get this automatically generated text in a pop-out. So it will tell them about the uncertainty associated with that site and also about the recency of records so far within the database. So then it leads on to this question, well, does this adaptive sampling make a difference? And we explored this through simulations. So we simulated, what I'm showing here is 3 different scenarios. People simply record as they always have done. People preferentially spend some of their time recording in gaps. And the third one is that people preferentially spend some of their time recording in gaps in an intelligent, targeted way. So what we found was that the gap filling has some benefit, particularly if lots of people are doing gap filling a lot of the time. But the really important thing is when you do this intelligent or targeted gap filling in the context of species distribution modelling, that spatial layer, then actually even small levels of uptake, just 1% of records, recording visits, being targeted to those places where we need it most, makes a substantial benefit to the outputs of the models. So that's a really powerful and motivating message to give to people. And this becomes really important as we think in the context of machine learning and AI, how many more uses there are for these sorts of models in terms of combining remote sensing data with citizen science, for instance, as we explored in this paper. And so finally, these are tools that people can go and they can visit and they can use, but we were interested in, does personalization and the sort of push notifications make a difference? So we've been exploring this in 2 projects recently. The first one is MyDecide, where we had nearly 1,000 people testing the impact of different types of personalized emails, looking at their impacts on their motivations. One of the things that we found there is that the greatest impact was on the infrequent recorders. So those people who do recording occasionally, actually these sorts of email prompts can have a big impact on their motivations. And secondly, the iRecord Insights, where we've had many more people involved in a controlled experiment, and that's going on currently. So bringing this all to a head, we've been developing and testing tools to support people to record nature where it matters. We're really looking at creating this virtuous cycle between recorders and data users for the benefit of people, nature, and the data itself. So thank you all very much.
more about how you used push notifications specifically.
So unfortunately, virtual participants can only type their responses, so we'll give them a minute to do that, and we'll come back at the end of the session with his response. Any other questions for Michael?
I was curious if you could talk a little bit about how you estimated uncertainty, because that's a very important component for the targeting, spatial targeting.
And one more.
Yeah, I was noticing that it was the number of models that had a greater than 1% improvement, and I'm just curious if there is a kind of a cost-benefit analysis of how much effort you put into getting people to do it versus how much model performance you really gain.
Thank you, everyone. That's given Michael a few things to think about, and we'll look forward to his responses. So our next presenter is Andrea Torello from the CNR in Italy, talking about a new platform to build and support citizen science projects. Hand over, Andrea.
Thank you. So thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Indeed, I'm going to present this new platform for citizen science project that we just call the Citizen Science Platform. That is a very simple name, but pretty effective. Next slide, please. This is just to say that the citizen science platform we developed is just one component of a bigger ecosystem of interconnected platforms and services that we developed in Life with Italy to support the full data lifecycle management. I will not spend much time on this, but tomorrow I have a talk on the session data integration and platform development. So if you're interested, you can join the session, or just feel free to stop me or my colleagues, and we are happy to talk about it. Next slide, please. So as I said, I will concentrate on the citizen science platform. When we planned it, we thought it's like really a digital place for sharing knowledge and tools and training material about citizen science project. But so we have many features in this platform that I will show in a minute. But the main feature that I want to show today that I believe is maybe more interesting in this venue is the possibility to create from this platform a fully customized web application for the collection of data from citizen science activity from scratch and completely for free. Next slide, please. So why? We do know that there is a growing interest in application, especially mobile application. I think that we'll experience this in our daily life. We use several mobile applications every day. But this is also true in the scientific literature. This increase you see here on the panel on the left is the number of times a mobile application is mentioned in the scientific literature. And this is especially true for citizen science. We know it. In this figure on the right, from the same review from 2023, the authors were able to identify more than 300 projects, citizen science projects that rely on application or mobile application. And what is interesting here is that about 50% of this project are from ecology or environmental monitoring. Okay, and I think we can explain this because mobile phone have native features that are pretty useful in this context. Like we can take pictures, record video, audio files, and there is also native geolocalization that is automatic in mobile phones. Next slide, please. Despite many projects don't rely on application or mobile application, these are just two examples, but I'm sure that you have many more in mind. Many projects, they just ask, take picture or record video and send an email to the project team, or just, in this case, upload on a Google Drive, a shared Google Drive. And this happens, of course, because developing application need IT expertise, need money, of course. This is not trivial. We have to deal with management of private information, and there is also an increasing demand for producing fair data. Next slide, please. So I'm going to show you this new toolkit that we created. This is a section within the citizen science platform to create mini websites that are dedicated to citizen science activities. So anyone can go there, register, and create its mini website. You can also upload metadata if you want to increase visibility. It is shown on the catalog of the platform. And then, most importantly, you can create customized web application from scratch. Okay, this is a screenshot I took from a project in Italy for the monitoring of wolf population in South Italy. So the scientists behind this built this application, and this is the view from the point of view of the citizens, so the users. Next slide, please. So what citizens can do here, they can browse all the observations that are validated by the administrator of the app, that is the scientist that build the app. In this case, a new Windows pop up, and all the observation can be browsed with filters or on a map. Then you can click on the pin and see all the metadata associated with that observation. In this case, we have also a picture, some metadata here. Next slide, please. And then, of course, most importantly, they can upload new observation. So you can click on the new observation button, a new window pop up, and the system automatically records the geographic location with the coordinates that you can modify in case. And then it asks you to fill in some metadata that have been decided by the administrator of the app, so these are customized. In this case, they are asking for the age, area of the observation, if any interaction with human happened, number of individuals, and then uploading an image, and then there is also a field for description, and then the observer can send the observation. Next slide, please. So this is the backend instead. So this is the view from the administrator point of view. So they can edit or view the website, but most importantly, can configure and view the application. Next slide, please. As I said, the administrator can configure completely the web application. It can add new observation types here. It can also add new attributes that are just new metadata that they want to collect, and then can go and see all the observation that has been sent by the citizens. Next, please. So from the observation panel, always from the admin point of view, they can filter all the observation, view the single observation, in case delete if they are not appropriate, or validate them. And also it is possible to export CSV files that is formatted in a way that can be directly pumped in the Life4Citary data portal. Since the CSV is mainly described by Darwin Core, this can be also easily transformed and uploaded on other systems like Civic, for instance. Next slide, please. So as I said, there are also other features. There is a section about the basic knowledge on citizen science with several sections. Next, please. Next. These are just several screenshots from the various sections. Next, please. Next. Okay. This was meant to be, you know, yeah, like an oral animation. Then we have a section for the best practices and tutorials for the development and management of citizen science project from the beginning, so the analysis of the problem, to the end, so the dissemination of the results. So each of these is actually, you can click on it, it brings you to a new section with case studies, tutorials, videos about it, publication, and all the materials that might be interesting for you. Next, please. Then we have a training room, which is a catalog for training material. Anyone can register on the platform and upload new metadata here. Next, please. And then we have the catalog for the citizen science project. Again, everyone can upload its own metadata on this platform, and then they can be browsed by filter or on the interactive map. Now, as you can see here, is not really used up to now because this is a relatively new platform, but we are now planning some dissemination activities at national level in Italy to try to boost the adoption of this platform among our scientific community. Next, please. Well, it is meant to be the last slide. There was the link for the paper that we published about 1 month ago with the whole life cycle, so you can maybe send me an email and I will send you the paper. Thank you very much. Oh, here it is. Magic. Thank you.
Thank you, Andre. And, apologies for the technical difficulties there. Again, we have time for 1 or 2 quick questions. Yeah, Ruben?
Thank you. So thanks a lot, Andrea, for a nice presentation. It's nice to see the integration of control vocabularies in citizen science platform. My question is, in the custom apps that people can create, how do you ensure that the people use the control vocabularies correctly? Is there any mechanism?
So there are some fields that are described by controlled vocabularies because they are quite standard, like coordinates, so latitude, longitude, this kind of stuff. But the customized metadata, like the age or the area of observation that are really peculiar to a project, yeah, we have 2 options. Or we control the creation of the new metadata, so we ask the admin of the web app to change in a way that is described by our vocabulary. Otherwise, it is not, and the CSV will not report it.
Yeah.
Do you want to read it? Yeah, I just read it. All right, so from Chauvin Leishman, and the question is, do you train scientists in copyright, open licensing, and fair data when they are designing their projects? Do you provide that training?
Sorry, I'm not getting the question.
When the scientists are designing the projects, do you train those scientists in copyright and open licenses and fair data? Do they receive that training?
No, we do not train scientists up to now to use this platform. We do not provide like tailored training for this. Okay, we are planning to do it. But I mean, when using our platforms, since we are funded by public funding, okay, so scientists know that we ask them to publish it in an open and fair way. So the license will be always or quite always CC BY for the data and CC 0 for the metadata. So this is our baseline for licensing. There are some maybe exceptions, but they're very peculiar.
Thank you. And also, Michael online unfortunately missed the first question that was asked to him, which I think was you, Carrie. Yeah.
Sorry, Michael. The first question was, can you just say more about how you used push notifications?
Thank you. Okay. In which case, we'll now move on to our final presentation, which, yeah, unfortunately was originally supposed to be in person, but they are unable to attend. But we have got a video presentation. I think there is a little bit of a quality problem with the video, but the audio is perfect. So hopefully we'll be able to follow along. So this is Babajide Agboola from the Agro-Veterinary and Environmental Consultant Limited in Nigeria, talking about taking citizen science to the grassroots.
Biodiversity conservation efforts in Nigeria are often hindered by limited data, centralizing research structures, and resource constraint. To add to these challenges, the Ekiti State Biodiversity Survey Project launched an innovative citizen science initiative in Ekiti State, leveraging on the iNaturalist application to engage local communities in biodiversity monitoring. This grassroots approach empowered residents, including youths, students, traditional custodians, and conservation enthusiasts, to document flora, fauna, using a simple mobile app. Now, citizen science involves public participation in scientific data collection, and iNaturalist enables this through photo, audio, and geotagging of biodiversity records. These are some of the photographs uploaded on the iNaturalist platform, the butterfly and the green pigeon. And here you see one of our volunteers using their smartphone to collect data for uploading. Now, documenting and monitoring biodiversity is one of our major objectives, and empowering communities as active conservation stakeholders, integrates traditional knowledge with modern science, advocates for creation of well-managed protected areas, legal protection of sacred groves and sacred forests. Here you see in the photograph one of the communities we are working in. It includes the men, women, and the youths, so no discrimination. And this is one of the signboards put up to delineate one of the sacred forests in Ekiti State. Now, implementation strategy. We started with community workshops, town hall meetings and seminars, training on the iNaturalist application, and then we engaged school students, clubs, and youth on field trips. The poster here shows you the one-day capacity building forum on biodiversity management and familiarization with the iNaturalist application. It was hosted by the Ekiti State Forestry Commission as far back as August 2021. We had speakers from all over the world that engaged through Zoom and spoke to the participants, all who are willing to, yes, take advantage of the situation of getting to know about how to document their biodiversity. We've also had events such as BioBlitz, where we took communities out. Here is one of our outings, which as far back as September 2023, where we did BioBlitz of a particular area. We had support of some of our sister organizations, GADEF, and the Ekiti State Forestry Commission as well. Now, key achievements. We've had over 700 biodiversity observations documented. We've documented over 1,000 species, and we've seen range and extension of the Ibadan Malimbe, which was observed in Ado-Ekiti. Ibadan Malimbe is an endemic and endangered bird species, one of the weavers, and very little is still known about the range and the activities of the bird. Now, we are the leading citizen science biodiversity project in Nigeria on iNaturalist, not in terms of the number of observations, but in terms of participants. And this is something we want to increase the number of coverage, the number of participants. And the graph here shows you that there are more animal species that have been observed, followed by plants, fungi, and then microorganisms. We also have a pie chart showing, 3 pie charts showing the different species that are observed. Now, sacred groves and restoration. Sacred groves such as Okeabani Jori, Igbo Ogun, identified as biodiversity hotspots, which was as a result of our outing 2 years ago, where we went around Ekiti State. We visited up to 32 local governments, and we went around documenting biodiversity in selected secret groves and secret forests. We came up with a list of 10 secret groves and secret forests to be delineated as protected area and designated as community protected areas, which was approved by the then governor of the state. And efforts are being now made to have boundaries of those places and put together the community to know how to manage their sacred forests and sacred groves. We've linked cultural heritage with ecological restoration. And in this photograph, you see one of the custodians of the sacred forests paying homage to the gods when we went to visit on our behalf. Now, the Ekiti Biodiversity Soil Project demonstrates inclusive grassroots-driven biodiversity conservation, combining technology as the use of smartphones, traditional knowledge as the indigenous names of some of these plants and what they use them for, and then some of the stories around them and community engagements, strengthening policy and stewardship in Ekiti State. We would like to definitely upscale what we are doing so that more states will be involved in such projects in Nigeria. In this photograph, I'm speaking to the governor of the state and a former senator and a few university lecturers on the importance of biodiversity and the importance of policymakers in, yes, making a difference in protecting our biodiversity. One of the main fallouts of this project is hearing the stories of the indigenous communities around biodiversity and finding out that there's a disconnect between what our ancestors did to protect biodiversity and what present day is doing with regards to biodiversity. And we're finding out that we have to bridge this gap so that we don't lose what we have and we take advantage of what we have to get what we want. A lot of stories have come out, and in later days, we'll be sharing some of this with everybody. Now, thank you very much for listening, and I want to thank iNaturalist for making this presentation possible. The Glen Cafe, we're very grateful. Ekiti Biodiversity Soil Projects, and Ekiti State Forestry Commission, and others too numerous to mention. Thank you very much.
To ask questions to that presenter, unfortunately. Obviously, there's in the conference proceedings, people's contact details are there, so if you do want to find out more, please reach out. I'm sure he'd love to hear from you. I don't know if we've got a response from Michael. We do? Do you want to?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So we have a response for the second and third questions for the moment. For the second, and I'm just going to read it. And overall in our paper, we tried a few different ways of assessing uncertainty. The results are largely similar though. My conclusion is that it usually doesn't really matter as long as you're doing it in a sensible way. But to answer your question directly, in the Decide tool, we summed uncertainty from SDM's outputs across all species that they considered. Thanks, Michael. I'm gonna read the answer also for the third question that he also had time to write down. He says, good question about whether the cost was worth the benefits to the models. The classic ecologist response would be about some formal cost-benefit optimization, but I'll answer a different way, in the spirit of supporting citizen science. We found that people were strongly motivated to make their recording count, and our tools demonstrate to recorders that their records are valued, so providing reassurance, thus benefiting recorder motivation, participation, and retention, which seems valuable even if it had no direct benefit on the models. One other angle is that these were SDMs. Other types of models, spatial temporal, or other types of data, collecting metadata or auxiliary data, might benefit even more from targeted data collection via behavior nudges for recording behavior. ¿Esta es la de la primera? Ah, venga. All right, so we also have a response for the first question for Michael, so I'm also going to read it. ¿Lo puedes poner aquí? Déjamelo aquí encima ya. Gracias. Right. So he says, if I understand correctly, it was about the push notification. Yes. We simply used email, but sending bespoke messages, text or visuals, based on the recipient's own data. In the future, in-app push notifications could be developed, but that is dependent on people being in the field already, so nudging certain recorded behaviors. Yeah, but less effective to others. Can you record in a completely different place versus can you see any other species? That would also depend on user acceptance to such notifications. And then he asks also the question, will the cost benefits be worth it? I also have another question. Too many things in my hands. If I only had another one. Yeah, thank you. This is for Chloe. Yeah. And also from Siobhan. And it's related to something you mentioned in your talk related to the lack of digital literacy in civic scientists. And her question is, have you thought about holding workshops to train civic scientists? Apparently there's been a previous presentation about training INAT folk in R to analyze their data sets.
Yeah, I think targeted workshops for citizen scientists would be a great idea. So we do offer Medinot-run data management workshops, and they're free for anyone to join. So we do try and promote those whenever we have anyone submitting data to us, so that could include citizen scientists submitting full data sets to DASH. We try and encourage them to join those workshops so they can learn more about data standardization, just data management concepts. And then if they have specific questions, we do also just have sort of one-to-one calls with them, or we can organize tailored sessions to help address that as well.
Thank you. That's everything from the line.
Thank you. There's still opportunity in the room to ask questions. I appreciate it's the end of a busy day for everybody. We've still got one more day to go. But if not, I would, I just want to thank our presenters. I think we've had some really inspiring, fascinating presentations, everything from kind of tools and applications to support the community collecting data and schemes sort of establishing through that full data value chain to the kind of analysis and interpretation of the high volumes of data that can be generated through citizen science schemes and the value that we can get from them and how it can be made broadly applicable. So I just want to thank our presenters again. If everyone would join me in a round of applause, we'll close the session. Thank you.